This is a free sample of the book Rise Above Rejection by Cairo Copeland. The first half of this book is posted right here on YouTube, free for everyone to listen to. If you like this content and want to hear or read the rest, or want to listen to it free of ads, visit reinventideal.com/reject. The book is available on Kindle, paperback, and Audible at reinventideal.com/reject. Intro. The worst pain rejection causes in the long term. It is better to endure a failure from a rejection than to be tied to a success you regret. I can hear the criticism coming already. Why the hell are you writing a book with such a fatalist outset? Why are you writing about how to handle failure instead of attaining success? Because how well you handle failure determines how often you get to handle success. Your attempts to shield yourself from failure are also shielding you from success. In this series, The Missing Manuals of Male Success, what I've found is that males hinder their own success by creating long-term problems that otherwise wouldn't have hit them. We are the masters of complicating our lives and justifying why we do it. Some ways in which they complicate and create worse problems for themselves is by getting into long-distance relationships, orbiting, simping, dating single mothers, and developing an unbreakable addiction to porn. The existence of these problems has allowed me to make my living as a writer, and what I've found common among all these problems is that at the root of them is a fear of rejection and desire to shield oneself from it. The shields from rejection that males develop for themselves condition them to accept not winning. They are, in fact, an admission of early defeat. The shields are raised up as a means of living life not to lose rather than playing to win. It is an acceptance of settling. Something that you can count on to happen consistently in your life is that what you settle for is exactly what you'll get and nothing more. Some of these shields raised up sound like everyday life for many males worldwide, existences they readily accept, and life conditions they don't even question as if they are the optimal way to live. The comfort from rejection they provide make the limitations on their lives admissible. Shields such as long-distance relationships. An inconvenient relationship is better than no relationship, some guys will rationalize. Being alone is so hard in today's world that they will look anywhere they can, even hundreds of miles away, to have their fix of companionship and approval from another person. But in these long-distance relationships, is either participant even happy? Suppose we are in the desert, wandering back to civilization while experiencing extreme thirst. You know that water will be available for you in the first town we reach, many miles away. But that does nothing to help you with your suffering now. Or suppose you were dying from a terminal illness. If your doctor told you, someday we'll have a cure for this dreaded disease, that would do nothing but piss you off because you don't have it now. Having a partner assigned to you in a distant town does nothing to help you if you're currently yearning for one now. Not even with all the technology we possess today like phones, text messaging, and video chatting. If communication with our partner were all that was needed, think of how much wealthier couples would be when they could pursue employment opportunities as they arose worldwide without having to consider their spouse's willingness to move abroad with them. A long-distance relationship is almost like having an imaginary friend that is less illusory because you can communicate with them, but more inciting of despair. You two believe you are so good together, which is why you tolerate the distance between. But you are not together, and that makes the distance feel greater as an obstacle. Much of your relationship is spent idealizing what it could be, rather than enjoying it as it should be. The pursuit and yearning for a positive experience itself is a negative experience because it's centered on what you currently lack. Despair cannot become the debilitating force it is if there is not a hopeful possibility existing to grow discouraged about. Friendzone orbiting. In some rejections, she tells you she'd like to have you as a friend first, and you play along with it, believing yourself to be playing the long game. She's still in your life, just not in the way you'd like her to be. So it's not a total loss. But the hope of having more someday is creating an even darker despondency under the surface. The soft rejection of "let's just be friends," or LJBF in forum circles, is still a rejection, but gives some leeway to save face. Her partial interest in keeping you around helps you from feeling totally unworthy, and perhaps someday she may change her mind, so you better hold out, you think. Meanwhile, missing better opportunities elsewhere and pissing away so much time. What the rejection refugee is failing to see is that the old LJBF line does not mean what they believe it to mean. It's merely a carryover line from the old days, the 1990s and earlier. In those days, ghosting was unheard of, not because women didn't want to just disappear from your life, but the way in which they met prospective suitors, through social circles, work, school, and church, meant they'd have to see these suitors again. They couldn't quit their jobs, dump all their friends, and skip school to ghost on them. Online dating was still something people were highly skeptical of back then, and few people used it. Once that rose in popularity, so too did ghosting. But a woman that tells you LJBF has the same feelings about you as a woman that ghosts on you. She just doesn't have the luxury of being able to ghost on you without social consequences. But the consequences a male should focus on are the long-term ones he causes for himself by continuing to orbit in the friend zone of a woman that doesn't intend to pull him out of it. Simping. Telling her exactly what you want is to risk rejection, but to linger around in her presence, be friendly, and give validating attention, perhaps even money and gifts she did nothing to earn, is a shield the majority of males employ. The world itself is a simp factory, so it is not the fault of males that they become simps. It is only their fault when they stay that way after discovering that's what they are. The sad life of a simp was extensively written about in my book, Don't Be Sympathetic, so I won't repeat it here. But in this sad life, a male avoids taking assertive action, as well as making his own wants known and his own needs a priority. He'd rather accept a life of settling than to rock the boat. Trouble is more painful to avoid than it ever is to just endure through, like spending a life of trying to avoid exposure to COVID-19 instead of just taking the vaccine. Simps will justify their behavior as chivalrous and exemplary of how they respect women when all they're really doing is simply disrespecting themselves. The blue pill conditioning teaches them that they must become less so a woman can become more, and they believe this helps them find favor with women enough to the point where they may override or at least avoid her rejection of them. This, however, is no different from a believer of liberal progressive politics that suffers from white guilt. This particular person puts themselves down for being white in hopes of winning favor from racial minorities, but while doing so, deeply annoys them. Further, the misery they create for themselves with their own self-imposed guilt makes for a less enjoyable life. Similarly, the misery a simp creates for himself, believing he is unworthy of a woman's gifts just as he is, pushes him to create a life less enjoyable in trying to make himself worthy. Simping is perhaps the most costly habit and one investment that creates more losses in proportion to what you put into it. Emails, DMs, texts, and lengthy phone calls. Technology that fosters other forms of communication, as an alternative to regular real-time in-person communication, serves as a shield against rejection. With emails, DMs, and texts, it doesn't entirely eliminate the event of being rejected, but it makes it easier to absorb when it's read rather than said to one's face. On the matter of lengthy phone calls, if we were to ask the guy that has them with a woman, and he were to honestly answer, he'd tell you that he doesn't particularly enjoy them. The one positive thing about them is that they are the closest thing he can attain from her in relation to what he really wants from her. He only has them because he's afraid to ask for what he truly wants. Many guys, including coaches and writers for the Red Pill Consortium, will say that this digital communication is how the current generation practices allure and navigates the mating market. I say that's bullshit. Speaking for myself and the guys I've coached, They were far more successful taking risks in real life with random women than they ever were online before learning the craft of allurement. In fact, their inability to get what they wanted through digital communication is what led them to seek coaching from me on how to communicate with a woman face to face. Further, when the impersonal communication through screens becomes a person's preferred method of communicating with women, it is being used as a shield against what harm a woman could do, namely rejection. Social media and online dating. Sister to the previous shield, social media and online dating apps work their wonders for the poor saps that wish to avoid the sting of rejection. With these two tools, they have access to beautiful women, albeit limited access, without the risk of being told to their face that they don't measure up to her standards. Online dating had become so much the preferred way to hunt for a woman that this once viable source of searching became so overly saturated with thirsty simps to the point where they outnumber the women 5-1. You may be the most alluring guy on the site, but the potential woman may never even know you exist because your message is buried under hundreds of messages from simps. The propensity to use this shield became so great and the results of success so pitiful that dating coaches adapted their programs to focus on success in online dating. Sadly, this shield functions more like a sword that stabs he who wields it. The infrequency of success, or even getting a match, will instill a scarcity mindset. Even when success is achieved, the prize is not worth the pain it took to acquire. After all, online dating is the mating market of single mothers, damaged women, and the unattractive. One-itis and the quality woman. One-itis is a threat to a male in every way possible. Most guys will have it at least once in their lives because of their blue pill conditioning. But in addition to that conditioning, zeroing in on one woman while ignoring all the others also serves as a shield against rejection because it greatly reduces the amount of women that can dish it out in his life. Other times you'll hear single guys say they are single only because they are holding out for a quality woman. Ask them to define such a woman, and they'll either use broad generalities or describe a woman that can't possibly exist because she sounds so perfect. The quality woman ideal they hold out for, though, is not so much about standards and more so about shielding. If you wait around for something that does not exist or is just too rare, you find yourself making less moves, making less attempts. You find yourself not having to try that often, and that greatly reduces the chances of getting rejected. Sure, all guys should have standards, and the higher the better, but for many of them, the high standards are merely an excuse to not try. This fictitious woman they idealize about becomes their new one-itis, or it becomes a justification for not trying with the available women that might reject them. Rushed and early marriage. Some guys got hitched with the first woman that loved them back or the first woman to scoop them up after a bad breakup. The justification for this rushed marriage was an understanding where the two parties involved implicitly thought, you're the best that I could get and I'm the best that you could get, and we both figured it out at the same time. The mentality this bred was a scarcity mindset. I'll take what I can get and be glad I got it, because the mating market was otherwise too challenging to survive in or come out from victoriously. Getting married as quickly as possible to the first woman willing may shield you from rejection temporarily, but it will not shield you from the rest of women's bullshit. Further, it's possible that this marriage will lead to more costly losses later on when the express wife's hypergamy kicks off. Older women. A woman whose biological clock is ticking down or has her best days of beauty behind her has less opportunity with valuable men. Those guys want the freshest hot young thing they can get, not old worn out goods. With those guys out of the running, your competition may be dramatically reduced. This older woman is likely to be desperate to find a man and less likely to be picky. She may make you feel good at first. It's great to be accepted finally, but once she hits the wall and has a guy locked down already, she has little to no motivation to do what pleases him, namely, maintain her sex appeal. Fatter women. Just a less attractive woman in general is easier to attain than the ones you really want. While some guys do have a thing for chunky chicks, that is not the norm. But the poor guy that's been through so many rejections just wants to feel accepted by someone, and a woman with no other options will readily accept him. Some guys like to believe that it's easier to make a fat chick thin than it is to make a hot chick nice. But the fact of the matter is that neither woman will change, least of all for a man. And as a personal trainer, I can tell you that it's not easy to make a fat person thin. Single mothers. This type of woman is a lot less marketable because she comes with a liability, a child that's not yours, and will probably hate you because you're pissing on the flame of that child's biological parents reuniting. Because valuable males don't want to deal with the baby daddy drama, they avoid this woman altogether. So again, your competition is greatly reduced. But your dissatisfaction is greatly increased. You'll never be a priority to her, let alone her first. She'll expect you to take responsibility for this child while having no authority over them. Further, the fact that she has this child demonstrates very poor decision-making skills and future planning skills on her part. The K-1 visa. If there's anything to learn from the Learning Channel, it comes from the reality TV show 90 Day Fiancé. In it, Americans with low sexual market value turn to the third world to find a lover. They hope to import a lover much like a mail-order bride. Even while seeing all the drama these imported lovers cause on the show, many guys still hope to use a foreign wife to solve their intimacy void. Not only is this a mistake, it's also a costly one. Firstly, the women are not grateful you brought them to America because America is hated worldwide, even by its allies, and the citizenship does not make you attractive to them. Secondly, the same fempowerment mandate that poisoned American women and made them unappealing has been exported worldwide. Any woman with a mobile phone has gotten a dose of it already. Take it from the poor sap Dariusz Walezda, better known as Rush V. He once found Poland to be the easiest place to pick up women because the female population over there was still feminine and highly submissive to men. After he returned there from a 2-year absence, hoping to find a good woman to settle down with, he discovered them all to be transformed into bitchy feminists with unrealistic standards for men. OnlyFans and porn. There are no social skills necessary to get your action with these two. As long as you pay the OnlyFans model, she'll never reject you. Porn doesn't shit test you, tell you it has a boyfriend, or asks you to wine and dine it before getting you off. How did Pornhub become the most popular website for males in the shortest amount of time? Because it feeds the biological imperative every male has, an insatiable hunger for unlimited sexuality. The male hunger for sexuality is something that women have come to understand is their source of power over males. That's partly why women are so outraged and disgusted by porn. It provides guys with something they used to be exclusive distributors of. But even stronger than porn is OnlyFans, as it simulates the relationship experience of having a girlfriend that texts you sweet messages and naughty pictures. Why go through the trouble of learning the craft of allurement when you can just dish out a few bucks a month to get something similar enough to simulate it? In the end, however, the guys that think this way come to realize that porn is kryptonite for males. Mental ruin and loss of sexual ability are all that follow. It's quite tragic that it occurred because the victim merely wanted to avoid discomfort. The same can be said of all these shields. Their long-term effects are more unforgiving to your life than the temporary pain of rejection. But the pain these long-term effects dole out is in small doses over time. At first, you don't even notice it. Tragedy occurs from it eventually, though, because the small doses of pain compound to greater depths over the long term, and one only realizes it when it's far too late. Even while knowing this, most guys still opt to use these shields. The paths of least rejection become the preferred way to live, reinforced by ego investment. The motive of rejection aversion makes them not only desirable, but even seem logical. Rejection really sucks, my client tells me. So why not go with something like one of these that makes it less likely to happen? because all these shields lead to worse outcomes than a fading sting from hearing the words, "I'm not interested." These methods compound the problems upon themselves and cross over each other. These shields become less about rejection avoidant methods and more integrated into your personality of who you really are. The shields increase the comfort of living a life where you play not to lose instead of playing to win. While rejection burns, it is the best teacher. The shields have you teaching and conditioning yourself to unconfidently handle adversity. They also reveal your true colors to a woman. Are you tough enough to take a rejection, or will you hide behind the shield like a simp? While an OnlyFans thought is happy to take a fan's money, never in a million years would she ever consider dating one. All said, learning to become fearless in the face of rejection and to continue pursuing, even when it's a likely outcome, will transform you into a higher value man. If the success ratio for asking out women is just 10%, that means more than only getting 10 women to say yes while 90 said no. That means you could find 100 even that will say yes, so long as you don't give a shit when 900 say no. Of all the things worth conditioning yourself to not give a shit about, is this one not worth it the most? And that is what this book is all about. By the time you reach the end of it, your relationship with rejection will no longer be one of fear or despair from it. Rather, one where it hardly bothers you and is forgotten about shortly after. A winner is just a loser that tried one more time. No longer fearing the possibility of losing again will get you to try infinite more times. Therefore, once the aversion to rejection is eliminated, the possible positivity it can add to your dating and sex life, or even just your life in general, is unlimited. Before we get Thank you for listening to this free sample of the book Rise Above Rejection by Cairo Copeland. If you enjoyed it and want to hear or read the rest, or want to listen to it free of ads, visit reinventideal.com/reject. The book is available on Kindle, paperback, and Audible at reinventideal.com/reject.